We are on the bottom of 28.3, Chav Ches Amud Aleph, and the last thing we saw was a Mishnah which said that the chametz of a non-Jew, which is in existence through Pesach, is mutter b'hana after Pesach. You're allowed to benefit from it after Pesach, and we said chametz of a Jew that exists during Pesach is forbidden after Pesach. Okay, and now the Gemara is going to want to try to understand who is the author of this Mishnah. The Mishnah is just said anonymously, and we'll see the Gemara is going to be troubled because there's a bunch of opinions about different sources that relate to this halacha, and none of them seem to match up. None of them seem to align with this Mishnah. Okay, so hold on tight. We're going to go through a couple of opinions, and today we're not even going to address the question. We're going to finish the question today. Okay, so let's see. Mani Masnisin, who is the author of this Mishnah, which says this halacha again that a Jew's chametz is forbidden in benefit after Pesach. A non-Jew's chametz is permitted in benefit after Pesach. Lo Rabbi Yehuda, v'lo Rav Shimon, v'lo Rav Tzigli. It's none of these three Tanaim. Mahi. What are we referring to when we said it's none of those opinions? The Tanya, the following brisa lays out their opinions. What are they? Chametz. Regarding chametz, bein lefnei zmano, bein la'achar zmano. Whether it is before its time, meaning from Erev Pesach, or it's meaning there's the time of chametz, the main time of chametz, of course, is on Pesach itself. But now we're saying even before its time, meaning on Erev Pesach, from the 7th hour and on, okay? Bein la'achar zmano, or after Pesach, meaning leftover chametz after Pesach, over a alav. A person who has it is in violation of a prohibition. Toch zmano, if you benefit or eat it during Pesach, over alav b'vlav v'chares, not only is there prohibition, but the punishment is chares, which is the most stringent of punishments, divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, that is opinion number one. Sounds pretty straightforward. Before Pesach, you're over an alav. After Pesach, you're over an alav. And during Pesach, you have alav and chares. Okay? Says the Gemara further. It says the brisa further. Rav Shimon Omer chametz lifnei zmano la'achar zmano eno over alav below chlum. Before Pesach and after Pesach, he says there is no lav. Now he does still hold it's prohibited, but he holds it's prohibited. Sometimes you could have a prohibition, which is an implied prohibition, but it's not the same as a lav, right? I could say don't eat chametz. Or I could say, chametz should not be eaten, right? Or I could say, I could make a positive statement which has an implication that you shouldn't do something. So Rav Shimon's of the opinion, there is no lav, there is no explicit prohibition telling you cannot eat it, but you can infer from the psukim that you shouldn't eat it. The difference being that if it's a lav, you get malchus for it, it's a biblical prohibition. If it's an implied prohibition, then you don't get the same type of punishment. But the bottom line, he says it's usher before and after, but not through a lav, not through a negative prohibition. Toch zmano, during Pesach, like Rabbi Yehuda said, over the kares uvelav, you get, it's a prohibited activity, and you get kares. Okay. Umisha she'asr ba'achila, asr b'hana. The brisa continues and says that from the time that chametz is forbidden to eat, it is forbidden to benefit as well. And the Gemara explains that line, asan l'tanakama. That line only goes like Rabbi Yehuda, who is the Tanakama. Why? Because Rav Shimon said it's not an explicit lav. Rav Shimon, who said that it is prohibited to have chametz before and after Pesach, he said it's not an explicit lav, and therefore the prohibition is only against eating, but not benefiting from it. Rav Yehuda, who said that the prohibition before Pesach and after Pesach is a lav, it says don't, as we'll see soon, it's going to be from the pasuk that says don't eat. If you recall from way back when, we had Rav Avo's opinion that says don't eat means don't eat and don't benefit. And therefore, this statement, it says that when the chametz is forbidden, is also forbidden in Hana. That is Rabbi Yehuda specifically, and not Rav Shimon. So let's just pause over here. I know it sounds overwhelming. It's pretty straightforward. Everyone agrees that during Pesach, if your person eats chametz, any amount of chametz on Pesach, you are in violation of a prohibition, and the punishment is kares. Bad stuff, okay? Before Pesach, meaning from the midday and on, of 7th hour and on, and after Pesach, both Rabbi Yehuda and Shimon agree it's forbidden. The question is, what type of prohibition? Rav Shimon says it's a negative prohibition, it's a lav, which means you shall not do something. And because it's a lav, it is usher in eating and it's forbidden in having benefits, right? So the difference is, of course, that let's say I have chametz that I own during Pesach by mistake, and forbidden eating means I can't eat it. Forbidden benefit means I can't even give it to someone else, right? Fine. And Rav Shimon holds it is usher to eat, but it's not forbidden in benefit because there's no negative prohibition. So it's forbidden to eat the chametz before Pesach. It's forbidden to eat the chametz after Pesach, but it's not. There is no prohibition against benefiting. I'm allowed to give it to a non-Jew. Good. So far, so good. Rabbi Yossi Glili Amar, the brisa continues and has a third opinion. T'mal atzmecha, you should wonder upon yourself. Hey chametz asur ma'ana kol shiva. He says that how could it be that chametz is forbidden in benefit all 7 days of Pesach? He says that even during Pesach, chametz is not asur b'hana. Even during Pesach, you're only not allowed to eat chametz, but you're actually allowed to benefit from chametz. Okay, those are the three opinions. What the Gemara is going to do now is show the sources for these three opinions, and ultimately going to conclude with a question about the authorship of our Mishnah. So let's see. So says the Brisa further. So Rabbi Yehuda, who is the one who said that from 6 hours and on, or really from the beginning of the 7th hour, that you're in violation of a negative prohibition. What's the negative prohibition? Shnemar lo sochal alav chametz. You should not eat chametz with it. What's it? What's it? So the Korban Pesach is with it. Now, when does the Korban Pesach begin? Okay? There's really two stages of Korban Pesach. So Rabbi Yehuda over here is understanding that the beginning of the Korban Pesach process really is on Erev Pesach, right? If back in the day, if you think you're busy right now on Erev Pesach, you don't know what's coming, okay? Because Mirz Hashem, B'Karov, we're going to have a Beis HaMikdash, and Erev Pesach is going to be insane. Because not only does our house have to be clean, not only do we travel to another city, by the way, for many of people, everyone who can't afford to live in Yerushalayim, but you're going to have to bring a Korban Pesach on Erev Pesach, and it's a chaos. There's 3 different groups. Bottom line is, on Erev Pesach, that's when Pesach really begins, because that's when you slaughter the animal, right? And then you bring it home. It's only in the evening that you start eating it. But Erev Pesach, you're not just cleaning and not just doing the last minute cleaning and last minute shopping, last minute cooking. You are in the Beis HaMikdash making sure that your animal is brought and that your animal is made back home, gets back home, so that you can have the Korban Pesach. That is what you're doing on Erev Pesach. Okay. So the bottom line is the pasuk says lo sochal alav chametz. You should not eat over it chametz. So what's it? The beginning of the Korban Pesach offering. And therefore, what we see from there, says Rabbi Yehuda, is that the prohibition of eating chametz begins when the Korban Pesach is brought, i.e., the 7th hour, which is when they started bringing the 7th hour of the day, meaning around 1 o'clock, they started slaughtering the animals, right? They actually, we'll see soon. In a while, they had it's going to go through the whole process, but basically they had to do it all day. They had 3 different groups because there's just so many people. But the point is that from the 7th hour on of the day, that's when they would bring the Korban Pesach, and that's when lo sochal, don't eat alav over it, meaning over the Korban Pesach, chametz. Okay. Amud Shimon says, what are you talking about? Can you say this? There's another pasuk that says, don't eat over it chametz, eat over it matzos. Now, when do you start eating matzah? At night. Everyone agrees you only eat matzah at night. So that same word, alav, over it, is clearly not talking about the sacrificing, rather it's talking about the eating. Right? So Rav Shimon says, yes, this pasuk over here, the first pasuk is a little vague. It says, don't eat chametz over it. And maybe it means the slaughtering. But then we have another pasuk. The next pasuk says, don't eat chametz over it, eat matzah over it. Over it, in that second pasuk, is certainly not talking about the time of the slaughtering, because everyone knows it's not only do you not have an obligation to eat matzah on Erev Pesach, it's forbidden to eat matzah on Erev Pesach, right? So Rav Shimon then posed the question himself. So then why do I have that individual pasuk that says, don't eat over it chametz? Whenever you have, to teach you the opposite, teach you that whenever you have the mitzvah to eat matzah, that's when you have the prohibition of not eating chametz. And when you don't have the mitzvah to eat matzah, i.e. before nightfall, you do not have the prohibition of eating chametz. So Rav Shimon is pushing back and saying there is no lav, and your source of lo sochal lav, it's a bad source. It's clearly that pasuk is referring clearly to a time after Yom Tov begins, right? In the evening when you're actually eating the Korban Pesach, and therefore there is no pasuk that says that there's a negative prohibition of eating chametz on Erev Pesach. Okay, says the Gemara further, my time at Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so now we go back to Rabbi Yehuda, who said that there is a prohibition on Erev Pesach. We rejected that pasuk of alav, and we're still stuck. Where do you, Rabbi Yehuda, learn that there is a negative prohibition against eating chametz before Pesach and a negative prohibition eating chametz after Pesach? So he says, Tlasak Raik Sivi, there's 3 psukim. Okay, what are the 3? And each one's going to teach me a different time. Lo ya'achal chametz, no chametz be eaten. V'kol machmetzes lo sochelu, you shall not eat any leavening. Lo sochel of chametz, do not eat chametz. Okay, why do you have 3 prohibitions against eating chametz? Say it once. Why do you say it 3 times? So chalif neizmano, one of them to teach me that it's aser. There is a lav, it's a negative prohibition to eat chametz before Pesach begins, i.e. Erev Pesach. Okay, that's pasuk number 1. V'chala achar zmano, and one pasuk teach me after Pesach is over, any chametz that's left over is also going to be aser. V'chala soch zmano, and the third one to teach me that it's during its time. So now, again, so what's happening over here is the Gemara tried to bring one source for Rabbi Yehuda, for Rabbi Yehuda, who said that there's a negative prohibition before Pesach. Rav Shimon rejected that, and now Rabbi Yehuda is going to teach us a different source as to where he learns the prohibition from. It says, don't eat chametz 3 times. Why say 3 times? Just say it once. Don't eat chametz. 3 times is because one is for Pesach itself. Cool, got it. One is for before Pesach begins, and one is for after Pesach. Each time you're over a lav if you eat chametz. Okay, Rav Shimon, what is Rav Shimon who says, right, what did Rav Shimon say? Rav Shimon said it's only a lav on Pesach. So he has now 2 extra psukim he has to find place for. So Rav Shimon chadlis sochs mano. Rav Shimon says one is for during its time, that we know. The chol machmetzes mibayle lechatanya. The second pasuk is needed for the following. Chol machmetzes what? Chametz. The pasuk says don't eat chametz. Ainli elish chametz me'alav. That's only something which becomes leavened on its own. In other words, there's certain products which are intrinsically leavening. They cause things to rise. Maybe that's the only thing that you'll be over on a lav for on Pesach. Machmas davar achar minayin. Let's say something else you cause something else to become chametz, right? You can have a certain dough or flour and water, and you can put a certain agent, right? And go ahead and cause something else, right? Everyone's making sourdough over here, right? So basically, you have what do they call the starters, thank you, right? And then you have like a little something which you take from it and it causes something else to happen, right? So you have something which is intrinsically becoming chametz and something which is you take from the starter and you can put it something else and it causes something else to become chametz. Maybe in that second category, maybe it's not included because it's obviously less potent, it's less intense. Tana lomar kol machmetzes lo sochelu. The pasuk says, no, the second pasuk teach me not just things which are intrinsically chametz, not just let's say the starter itself, but also something where you put something from the starter and you feed it to something else. Okay, lo ya'achal chametz. The third lo ya'achal chametz. What do you need that for? We need it for the following teaching. Rabbi Yosef, fascinating teaching, by the way. Rabbi Yosef Yomer minay lePesach Mitzrayim. How do we know regarding the first Pesach she'ein chimutza noeg el yom echad, that there is only one day of a chametz prohibition? Did you know that? At least according to one opinion, that only on the first day of Pesach were they usher to have chametz, but after the first day they were actually allowed. Yeah, actually, after the first day, they were allowed to eat chametz. Where do you see this from? Tamalomar lo yachal chametz. The pasuk that Rav Yehuda was using. Rav Shimon says, look, this pasuk is used for the following. It says, don't eat chametz. Usmichle hayom atzem yotzim. And then the next pasuk says, today you are leaving Mitzrayim. So why does it put the two together? Don't eat chametz today. That's what it sounds like, right? Don't eat chametz, period. Today you're leaving Mitzrayim. But you can read that also, don't eat chametz today. Right? And basically, Rabbi Yosef learns from there that in the original Pesach, they were only forbidden to eat chametz on the first day. Now again, Hashem made it that they ended up not eating chametz all the rest of the Pesach because they didn't have time for the bread to rise. But they were technically allowed to. Fine, a drush onto its own, we come back to another point. But the bottom line is, Rav Yossi, let's just review again. Not so hard, just need to keep on reviewing. Rabbi Yehuda says there are 3 psukim. One pasuk that says don't eat chametz for before Pesach. One pasuk for during Pesach, one pasuk for after. Shimon says no. One pasuk for during. One pasuk teach me that a leavening agent, not only intrinsically leavening, but even a leavening agent has also become chametz. And the third is to teach me that for the original Pesach, that chametz was only usher on the first day. Okay, what about Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda, machmas davar achar minale. How does he learn that first teaching? That it's not just something which is intrinsically chametz, but even if you use a starter, you use a leavening agent on something else, and then it's going to be usher. The fact that it says it should have said chametz. Machmetzes implies something which is not pure chametz. And therefore he learns from there that even if only a part of it is a leavening type of thing, it's going to be aser. Okay? It's Rabbi Yosef Glili Minale. And where does he learn this idea that chametz is only aser on the first day for the very first Pesach? 2 options. One is he holds you don't need the entirety of that pasuk to teach me this. Rabbi Yehuda says the fact that the pasuk just said hayom next to the pasuk of don't eat is enough to teach me this halacha. But that still leaves that whole verse, that whole pasuk, available for teaching. In other words, Rav Shimon said, you need the whole thing. It has, the fact that it says don't eat chametz and then it says hayom, that's what teaches me that it's only the first day. Rav Yehuda says no. It says don't eat chametz, and that teaches me one of the 3 extra don't eat chametzes. The fact that it says hayom next to it, that's enough. That's all I need, right, to teach me this halacha, and therefore that first pasuk which says don't eat chametz, I could still use it. Alternatively, he actually doesn't hold of this whole juxtaposition, and he disagrees with Rabbi Yosef Glili and holds that no, on the first Pesach it was actually forbidden for them to eat chametz the entirety of Pesach. Okay, Amar Mar. Now we continue to analyze this brayso a little bit further. What is the source? Again, that it is forbidden to eat chametz from the 6th hour on. Again, on Erev Pesach, people think it's a. We'll have to see what we pass like, but at least according to really the 2 opinions we've seen so far, it's an Isra Doraisa. It's only a question of is it a lav, is it not a lav, is it an implied lav? But the point is, it is Asr Midoraisa of eating chametz on Erev Pesach. People are like, oh, it's a chumrah. No. Daraisa, okay? So not that a rabbinic prohibition is not strong, but the point is it's a daraisa. So that's what Gemara is asking. What is the source for eating from the 6th hour and on that it's lo to say? Shneimar lo socha lav chametz. The pasuk says, "Don't eat chametz over it." Again, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Amar Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon says, "V'chi afshar lo markein." How can you say that? V'lok for namar lo socha lav chametz shivas yom tocha lav matzos. Right? This was the question we asked before. Don't tell me a lav means that at the slaughtering of the Pesach, which is from the beginning of the day, the next pasuk says a lav clearly refers to the eating, and therefore there is no prohibition, says Rav Shimon. There is no prohibition, says Rav Shimon, regarding eating it. There's no prohibition about eating it during the afternoon, only at night. Rabbi Yehuda, and now the Gemara turns to Rabbi Yehuda. Shabbat Karmel Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon actually has a pretty good argument against you. How do you respond to that? He says no. The reason we have this other, he says the second pasuk of Losochel of Chametz, Shivas Yom Tochel Matzos, is actually coming to teach us something totally different. It's actually coming to teach you may have thought, we take certain things for granted. How do you know that you have an obligation to eat matzah nowadays? Right? Keep in mind, when the Torah presents the mitzvah of Pesach, there's 3 steps. There's eat matzah, right? There's eat the Korban Pesach, and don't eat chametz. So we don't have a Korban Pesach nowadays. Who says you eat matzah? Who says, right? So the second pasuk is coming to teach you that no, even though, he says no, keep the first pasuk the way I suggested. And don't tell me I'm misinterpreting because of the next pasuk. No, the next pasuk is actually coming to teach me that in as much as I have a prohibition against chametz nowadays, okay, so too I have a mitzvah to eat matzah. And that's what that other pasuk is coming to teach me. Rav Shimon, Rav Shimon says, how do you know that there is a obligation to eat matzah nowadays? How do you know that? Nafkalei mi be'erev tochlu. He says those words of in the evening you should eat it is actually extra to teach me that even when I don't have a Korban Pesach, I still have an obligation to eat matzah nowadays in the evening. Rabbi Yehuda mi ba'ileh tamei. Rabbi Yehuda, again, it's like a ping pong game, right? One pasuk, one person learns something from the pasuk, the other person has to reconcile that pasuk. So Rabbi Yehuda says no, those words of in the evening you should eat it is to teach me about someone who is tamei, v'shay b'derech rechok, or someone who is on a distant journey. Okay, so there's a famous passage in the Torah which talks about the Korban Pesach and says every male Jew has to bring a Korban Pesach. However, let's say you are tamei, or you are very far away from Yerushalayim, then you don't bring a Korban Pesach. Then what do? That's where Pesach Sheni kicks in. But let me ask you a question: the person who's tamei, do they granted they don't bring the Korban Pesach, but do they eat matzah? I don't know, right? So he says, since this person who is at a very far distance, or is tamei, doesn't bring the Korban Pesach, matzah mar nami lo nechol, they also shouldn't eat matzah mar kamash malan. The pasuk in the evening Yishim matzah teaches us that they're obligated to eat matzah that evening. Okay, Rav Shimon, what about Rav Shimon? How does he learn that? Because again, he said that pasuk is being used to teach me that there's an obligation to eat matzah nowadays. So what does he do? How does he learn about the person who's distant or the person who is tamei? Rav Shimon, tamei b'shai b'derech choka, he says you don't need a pasuk for that. Why? It's not worse than someone who's uncircumcised or a stranger. Okay, what we're referring to over here is someone. Let's say there are people who actually it's forbidden for them to get a bris milah. Who's that? That is someone if they have 2 siblings who died after getting the bris milah. We actually don't give a bris milah to that person, meaning because we assume that there's something genetic about this person, and therefore we don't get. So it's totally sanctioned. But because of that they can't bring a Korban Pesach. You need to have a bris milah. Male has to have a bris milah in order to bring a Korban Pesach, and therefore what would happen is so. The Torah though says that nonetheless this person, or even a person who doesn't keep all the mitzvos, they're still obligated to eat matzah on Pesach. The Sivichal Ara Layochal Bo, any uncircumcised Jew should not eat the Korban Pesach. Bo he doesn't eat the Korban Pesach, but Ochelu Matzah, he still is obligated to eat Matzah Mar. Again, someone who's uncircumcised, even if it's sanctioned, he still has to eat Matzah Mar. So Rav Shimon says that in as much as we know that someone who's uncircumcised has to eat Matzah Mar, so too someone who's tamei or someone who's very distant, of course that person also has to eat Matzah Mar. There's no difference. Rabbi Yehuda he says no, we want to write it by each one, and that concludes the sources. Okay, at this point we've reconciled all the psukim, but the bottom line of what comes out is again, Rav Yehuda says there is a lav to eat chametz before Pesach, a lav to eat chametz after Pesach. We have Rav Shimon saying there's only a lav during Pesach, and Rav Yosef Glili who said there is no prohibition of hana, of benefits, even during Pesach itself. So now the Gemara concludes with the following question. Mani masnisin. So going back to how we started the whole discussion. So who is the author of our Mishnah? Rabbi Yehuda, if it's Rabbi Yehuda we just mentioned, chametz stamach amar, afil denachri. When Rabbi Yehuda said it's forbidden to have chametz on Pesach, he didn't distinguish between a Jew and a non-Jew. He said chametz that was in existence on Pesach cannot be eaten after Pesach. That means that even chametz of a non-Jew cannot be eaten after Pesach. Our Mishnah said chametz of a non-Jew can be eaten after Pesach. If Rav Shimon, and if it's Rav Shimon, then what? Yisrael nami mishra kashari. He said that it's only on Pesach that there is a prohibition. After Pesach, Rav Shimon did not have any prohibition. Our Mishnah said after Pesach it is asur. A Jew who had chametz is asur after Pesach. Rav Yosef Glili, afil toksmano nami mishra kashari bana. And if it's Rav Yosef Glili, Rav Yosef Glili said that even during Pesach you could benefit from chametz. And our Mishnah said on Pesach it's asur bahana. And even so who is the author of a Mishnah? None of these three opinions actually seem to match up for our Mishnah, and therefore the Gemara is left with a question as to who is the author of Mishnah, which God willing we will try to answer tomorrow. Have a great day.